Here is the setup for putting in the pocket hole screws out in the center of the boards. When we're doing it at the edge, it's real easy to clamp them at the edge of the workbench. But when you get it in the middle, it's clamps don't reach that far. When you're trying to reach, all the way there. There are probably specialty ones, but I don't have any, and they're inexpensive, even if they have them. So what I've done is you have to have a table or something that you can do this with, some small table. You can probably find something. But I put that 2x4 across the middle. You can see just to the side, and it actually even helps to have a little bit of crown in the 2x4. That is, if it's curved like this, just a little bit. That way, when you clamp both ends, you're sure that it's actually pressing down in the middle, and then when you contact it at the sides, you've got good pressure all the way across. The only issue is that if the boards are slightly different thickness, and they usually are unless they've been planed, and I don't have a planer, they could still move a tiny bit, but this is going to keep them. This is going to be a way bigger improvement than just trying to do it without holding it down at all. And you notice that the 2x4 is vertical. That is way stiffer than doing it flat. This is a weird engineering thing, but for something that's bending, where you're trying to bend it like this or like that, how we're doing here, if you double the thickness this way, you actually increase the stiffness of the board or the beam, whatever, 8 times. So it's a lot. It's, you've got 1.5 inches by 3.5. It's more than double. It's at least 10 times stiffer this way. And if you try to get any motion at all of those boards, that vertical 2x4 should keep them in check. Anyway, that's how I'm going to finish off the rest of the screws, and hopefully keep a nice smooth outside edge with a minimal need of evening it out. You can really see the issue here. This one right here has got some bow in it. You can see it sticking up really bad. Now watch what it looks like once I clamp it down with this board. There we go, see? Almost flush now. I jumped ahead a little bit putting putting the panels together, but that was because I wanted to feel like I was making some progress, and that's a good way to do it, getting something done. However, I still have one more piece to add to each panel. On the front, it's the piece that's going to be the legs. I don't know if you can see it here, but I've drawn a line here and down. These are going to be the feet for the chest, and that's going to involve trimming, and I wanted to leave that for later. But now I've come to it. And because this is kind of a tricky way to do things, I didn't really have a way to just stick a block at the corners for the feet, so I decided to do it this way, and I'm not going to change it. But cutting something out like this is something you do. You can't really do it on a table saw. You've got this, you don't go all the way. You could probably try to do it on the middle like that, but that's just a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to do it on my bandsaw. But the problem with doing things on a bandsaw, this is the bandsaw right here. You can cut curves and things on it. Is that it also has a tendency to kind of wander a little bit, and you can cut straight lines with it, but you've got to find out it doesn't work the same way as a table saw where you just line it up with the blade. The blade will cock sideways a little bit, and then you actually have to run it through at an angle. Set up well, I was actually able to make a pretty decent straight cut on there. It's fine. It's just you've got to go in and do a couple of things back and forth. I've just got some stuff I need to sand off here, and actually it's actually not too bad. So I didn't do a very good job right there. Now I'm having to, because this is not going to be visible. I mean, it's down underneath the bottom, but I mean, still, all know it's there. Too much, we'll have to make it show from the front. By the way, this is a Harbor Freight belt sander. It has no power. Do not buy one of these. It's no good. Get a Delta of the same size, 4-inch belt, 6-inch disc. Used to have one, but it got damaged, and saved a few dollars and got this, and it was not worth it. Now we really come to the moment of truth. This is the box joint jig that I made. Well, I paid somebody to make this. Very similar to what you can buy, but this is for the spacing and stuff is different than I wanted to use, which is kind of funny because now I'm not using the material that was 1 inch thick, and this is 1 inch spacing. That way my box joints the ends could look square, which they're not going to anymore. So I probably should have just bought a jig, but actually I think they're over $100. So hey, that's my cheapskate nature plus liking to do stuff myself interfered with that. Anyway, I'm going to do a test now. Need to put the board in here, up with the end here, and then, well, you'll see. All right, here's a piece of scrap. It's cut from the boards that I was originally going to use, the thick ones, but it's a waste piece. Same width as the ones I'm using now, so it's going to be a test cut. Going to clamp it in here up against. Okay, now we'll see how that goes. Now, I have screwed up, and I'm going to have to deal with it. You see, here's the router. Here's the router bit. And here's the bushing that guides this into this slot. And this is not the recommended way of doing this, and I knew it wasn't. Because the router bit is larger than the bushing diameter, so it sticks down below the router. And I thought I had actually I had thought about that before, and I guess maybe I just didn't put this together right. I need to add a spacer here because I was going to use the bottom of this to butt the wood against to make sure I've actually got it in there straight, but I need to add a spacer and lift this up because this is going to cut. Not only is the bit 1 inch and 1/8 cutting, I was going to have to have it up where I was only cutting 1 inch. Now I actually have to have it 3/4. So I've got to have this raised up even more because I switched over from 1 inch thick wood to 3/4 inch wood, and that's the thickness of the wood is the depth that you cut the notch for the joint, so it matches up to the wood thickness. So now I'm going to have to mess around with this to get it to work. I should have just used a 3/4 inch from the beginning, and then it can slip inside the bushing and go up and down, and maybe I'll end up doing that anyway. Of course, I bought this nice 1-inch diameter bit, and maybe, I don't even know if I have a 3/4 inch bit, and if I do, it's a Harbor Freight one, but I may have to do what I can with what I have where I am. That sounds really cool most of the time until you end up in a situation like this, which I willingly stepped into, actually. That's why, sometimes when you do things differently, you discover things, and one of the things you discover is why people don't do it that way. All right, I've added something that's about 5/8 thick. That's what I needed to do to be able to raise the level of this up to where I would only be cutting 3/4 inch deep. I've made a couple of test cuts, and then also used the board that was the right thickness to check, and I think I'm at the right depth. So now I'm going to go and make some other practice cuts to see how, well, you'll see. Skip to the second slot, or the third slot actually. Did one in the first. My intent was to have the router bit make cuts into this guide so that it would make sure and go all the way through the board, and that was okay. When I put the spacer here, now the shaft of the router bit is bumping into this, so I need to go ahead and cut these areas out. I could just slice it off on the table saw, but I want to leave stuff there to try to keep this as stable as possible. Well, it turned out I needed to cut a lot of that off anyway, because I have to have a surface here that's something like this ruler to be able to make sure I actually get the board at the right height. And even then, this is going to be a little bit iffy. We'll see how I can hold it down there, and it'll provide a good surface to put the to be able to mount the board I'm working on. So we'll see how that goes. But here's the results. At least they fit together. I know they don't go all the way together. That's because I'm using 1-inch boards here with scraps of. I've got a lot more scraps of these, so I'm going to waste scrap material. I'm going to mess around with these first. And when it comes to how deep it is and actually matching up using the proper material, that'll be the last thing I check, because I don't have very many scraps of that 3/4 inch material. So, but hey, at least it fits in. But there's a little bit of play in it that I don't like. And I'm going to go ahead and put some tape onto the bushing and see how that helps, just to provide it with a little more, less clearance. Now something strange has happened. I added a piece of tape to make the adjustment, to take the play, a little bit of play out of it, and it seems to have worked. I'm not used to that happening. So it slides right in, and there's no play in the teeth at all. It's probably impossible to see on there, but before you, my eye, I could actually see gaps besides feeling it. Here, it just slides in, no play. Pretty cool. Now I need to adjust. I need to work on it. Work on some 3/4 inch pieces to see if they'll actually fit, slide all the way through, and fit the way they're supposed to. Even for the background noise, it's raining, and I'm in a metal building. But at the end of that last shot there, I've stuck those pieces together, just messing around, and I thought it was rather odd that they don't fit all the way. They should both have the same depth of cut both ways. That should be buttoned in there. So that piece, one of these pieces moved. Either I didn't get it in the same spot, or it moved when I was cutting it. So that's not good. So I think I'm going to use some of this is the same piece of wood that I used to make the spacer here. I think I'm going to use that in there put that in there for using to place the material when I clamp it in. But I'm definitely going to have to clamp it in more securely in some way, because it might have moved when I was actually routing it. So, one more thing to deal with. There's our 3/4 inch test pieces. I'm going to say it's not perfect, but for me, it's as perfect as I think I've ever gotten. So when you call it personal best. So now I think I am actually ready for the really scary part, which is actually doing it on the pieces, the real pieces, not the test pieces. Now this is the moment of truth. I'm about to start routing on the actual pieces. Anything goes wrong now, and it could be real big trouble. So I'm going to pray first. And you guys can pray too. God's not subject to time, so maybe when you see this, prayers will be retroactive.